Hi, it's Ileana, and today I am going to be discussing the ancient Andromedan Ark ships called the Siene and the Saliel, which the sixth-dimensional Andromedan pilots had been piloting. And so these were big Ark ships that had the mothership, which was the Siene, and it would launch the smaller Ark ships like the Saliel. And it was really interesting when I was doing a psychic reading, it was interesting to have a look at the various shapes, what the Andromedan ones looked like, different from the Atlantean ones, the Cedar race, the ancient builder race. So some of these ships look very different from each other, and they had different beings piloting them. And what I was doing a psychic reading on was a pilot that was piloting the Saliel, the smaller Ark ship that had been launched from the bigger elongated mothership, the Siene. And the pilot could interface with all the crystalline technology and systems. There was crystal matrices on the Siene and the Saliel Andromedan Ark ships. So they were large, and they would do space exploration, planetary exploration, and these Andromedans that were sixth-dimensional, they could live anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 years. So their lifespans were long. And I had learned that one of these pilots on the Saliel, this pilot, she transferred over from the big mothership, the Siene, she transferred over to the Saliel, and she had helped to launch the Saliel in its vector trajectory from the Siene mothership. So she was able to, with her abilities, holographically interface with the crystalline matrix systems on both of the motherships. And there had been some issues with one of the crystalline engine matrices. So the pilot called in for help. So there was a familial connection. So the pilot called in somebody they knew from their family who was a crystal tuner. And this crystal tuner was able to have a look at the crystalline engine matrices and to fix it. So they were able to energetically recalibrate and regenerate the crystalline matrices on the crystal system that almost exploded in on itself because there was a bit of an overload in the crystalline engines. And this can happen even on ancient Ark ships. This can happen. And apparently these crystalline systems and matrices, because they're living life force energy, they can be retuned, recalibrated, and reconstructed. So even though it was almost shattered, it could still be brought back together as a whole with the crystal tuner. That was her abilities. So I am going to be showing you what that looked like in the psychic reading. Siene Ark Mothership and Saliel Ark ship with Andromedan sixth-dimensional beings. I had done a psychic reading for an individual where it was discovered that there had been information about Ark ships existing 12,000 years ago, where sixth-dimensional Andromedans with long-lasting lifespans, going from 3,000 to 2,000 years, were piloting the Ark ships and interfacing with the crystalline engines and systems on the ships. These sixth-dimensional Andromedans had the abilities to be able to interface with crystals, and they could regenerate the broken crystal matrices in order to reconstruct even shattered crystals so that they would be whole again and part of the crystalline engines. One of the Andromedans had been traveling on the mid-sized Ark ship called the Saliel that had been launched in the Andromeda galaxy by the Siene Ark Mothership. This Andromedan's job on the Saliel Ark ship was being the pilot and interfacing with the crystalline engine matrices while navigating the Saliel in order to seed life on other planets. During the Saliel's long-distance travels, there was an energetic surge and it overloaded part of the crystalline matrix systems connected to the engines, and it was shattered. So all the systems on these Ark ships are crystalline. The crystalline systems, the crystalline engines, they're all crystalline energies and frequencies connected together. So when one of the crystalline matrices shattered, it also stopped the secondary crystalline engine, one of the engines. The pilot Andromedan on the Saliel called in one of the crystal tuners to come to the Saliel in order to reconstruct the shattered crystalline matrix system so that the second crystalline engine could be reactivated in order to continue the space voyages to distant galaxies. So the primary functions of these Ark ships was to seed life on other planets. That's what the Andromedans used to do. And now these Ark ships are like time capsules, they're holding all the histories of the various solar systems, the planets, the galaxies, including Earth, Terran history, Venus, Mars, the moon, how our galaxy was created, how our universe was created, because these Ark ships go back millions of years, potentially even billions. That's how old they are. So they're time capsules. And some of them have been reactivated with that information on them. So it would be interesting to see in the near future these Ark ship capsules, time capsules being found and explored by human beings. As was seen in the past life sequences, the crystal tuner was able to regenerate the crystalline matrix system, and the second crystalline engines came back online. So the Saliel could continue to travel in outer space in its space exploration in seeding planets with new life forms, new ETs, plants, animals. While viewing the Ark ships, I could see that when the Saliel Ark ship was being launched from the larger Siene Ark Mothership, the Andromedan pilot had been interfacing with the holographic crystalline technology on almost an astral realm connection, where they were projecting their mind out to the crystalline systems of the Saliel to make sure that the Ark ship would be launched on a correct travel velocity trajectory. And the pilot was guiding this process of vectoring the Ark ship through the crystalline systems. So the pilot was basically connecting from the Siene to the Saliel, and they were vectoring the ship trajectories to launch the Saliel. So it seems that the holographic system interfaces between both of the Ark ships are connected to the crystalline components on both ships that makes it possible to send out the mind-thought consciousness in order to be able to interact or interface with two ships at the same time, thereby creating an energetic bridge foundation system where the mind helps to coordinate the launch of such smaller exploration Ark ships from their larger Ark Mothership counterparts. While doing the psychic reading for the individual, I had connected to the Andromedan crystal tuner's energy frequencies of their soul spark, and that soul spark had this beautiful, beautiful color of cerulean. in order to be able to do the psychic interface, as the crystal tuner is now the higher self of the individual for who the psychic reading was being done. Sometimes our higher selves, sometimes our higher selves have been us in our past lives, and they can tell us what had happened in those lifetimes. And in this instance, this individual's higher self showed the past lifetime of them being the pilot, at first on the Siene and then the Saliel Ark ships. This information comes through almost like a psychic story arc with sounds and visuals for what the beings looked like, what they did, as well as when they lived and how their lives were like in the lifetimes that are being seen. So I was seeing these scenes happening of these ark ships and the pilot's life, the crystal tuner's life, and their family, their soul family. So that was quite amazing to see that. When connecting to our higher selves, we can psychically sense the frequencies of the dimensional existence of where our higher selves are currently, where they are currently. For example, the crystal tuner and the ark ship pilot are 6th dimensional beings. So this is the connection that we are on with them as well. Once you know the higher self's name, it is easier to form the psychic communication with them. I have been asked, how do we connect with the higher self, and how many higher selves do we have? So we connect to the frequencies of our higher selves, the dimensional frequencies of where they existed and where they're now. So the pilot and the crystal tuner are still existing in 6th dimensional frequencies. So this is how I connected to them, and I connected to their soul frequencies, their soul sparks, and that's how I discovered their names. So it's a very energetic process of connection that I think all humans are capable of, as long as they're working on opening their psychic channels, their psychic energies, and wanting to form the connection. You ask to connect to your higher self, to speak with your higher self, to know their name, to know the dimension that they're connected to, what their soul spark is like. You connect on the inner level with them. We can connect with our higher selves by starting to ask who are our higher selves, what they're like, and their names, and what dimension are they connected to. Were they part of our past lives? And if so, could they please show us those past life memories, so that we can better understand what connections we have with them for those past lives, as well as what is important for us to know in this current life that our higher selves can help us with. And our higher selves are always here to guide us in positive ways, to help us with anything that we need in life. They're always helpful because they're part of our lives. They're part of our soul sparks. They're connected to us from our pasts, from our present, and our future. And all of us have a higher self or higher selves. And they're part of our higher wisdom. They're part of our sacred experiences from past lives, from the current lifetime. So you can say they're the watchers of ourselves because they're there, they're present, they can see everything. They're omnipotent, they can see everything that's happening in our life from the higher dimensions that they're in. So they know what's going on in our lives. They know what's happening to us and how to help us, especially if we ask for it and it's divinely provided. In terms of how many higher selves do we have, it can range from 1 to 2, and usually the higher selves have a specific name vibration resonance for what our true soul names feel like to us. The higher selves will often have the correct soul name vibrations, or they can tell us our true soul name if their name varies from the soul name aspects. So the higher self can have a different name from your soul name. Sometimes there's connections and sometimes there's not. It depends on what has happened in your past lives, especially the galactic ones. So it's very interesting. I found that higher selves often have different names from the soul name. So there's two names or more. And the higher selves can sometimes have genders. So they could be female or male, depending on the soul frequencies, or they can be pure light energies. There is no one specific way that the higher self could present itself to us. They will appear to us in whatever form that we are comfortable with while interacting with them. So they can take on any shape, any form, or they can be a light being, or it's just a voice that you're hearing, or it comes in images, and how your higher self interacts with you. My higher selves interact with me telepathically, so I can hear them talking to me. They sort of have a voice similar to mine, but yet different from mine, because they're higher aspects of myself, but on a higher vibrational frequency or frequencies. Our higher selves are the parts of our soul records that can be connected to our past lives, and often we can learn more information about our past life selves from the higher self aspects and perspectives, like what had happened in the psychic soul reading, where the individual's higher self connected to the crystal tuner past life as a sixth dimensional Andromedan being, and was able to describe to the individual what that life was like, and that in that particular lifetime, there was also the Andromedan pilot that had the connection with the crystal tuner. The higher self had explained that these Andromedan beings can live for thousands of years without aging or dying. So for them, time is not linear, but it is fluidic, and it has no barriers in terms of living their lives and fulfilling their soul missions of helping beings ascend to their highest soul divine levels, potentials, and reaching their true soul potentials in their existences of continuing soul evolution and soul growth. So these beings all have a higher purpose. They all have their specific soul missions. And for these Andromedans in the sixth dimension, it was to help soul evolution of other beings. That's why they were on these Ark ships and traveling to seed other planets, so that future generations would evolve. That's soul growth. That's part of soul evolution and soul growth discovery. And those are specific soul growth missions that they were on. They were very much dedicated to that. They dedicated their lives to those missions, the pilot and the crystal tuner. So this is what some of this crystalline technology looks like. And even their hands are connected to the crystals, to the frequencies of the crystals, the pilot and the crystal tuner. So this is what this looks like, the crystal connection. Holographic thought consciousness interface system technologies that connect with the crystalline systems in order to pilot the Ark ships. So the Andromedans, these beautiful sixth dimensional Andromedans, they had the ability of holographic thought consciousness to create interfaces with the crystalline systems and matrices on the Ark ships, to pilot them, to navigate them, to change course, and to connect with any of the systems on these Ark ships, because these are all crystalline systems that the Ark ships are made out of. It's crystals, it's crystal matrices. It's not part of the crystal. It was the whole crystal matrix system. There would be many of them connected on the Ark ships, and it made them sentient. And this is one of the Andromedan sixth-dimensional beings. This is the pilot, and she was wearing a crystalline smart suit while being on the Ark ships, the Siene and the Saliel. Andromedan sixth-dimensional beings piloting the Ark ships about 12,000 years ago. The Andromedan protective smart suits are made out of crystalline materials that protect the wearer from space dangers, and the crystalline frequencies can create crystal swords and other types of armor that allow the Andromedans to function out in space for long periods of time. So they would wear these crystalline smart suits or armor because space is a tough environment to be in. So they had a lot of very good protection with the crystalline smart suits. Even in those times, they had this kind of crystalline frequencies connected to their smart suits and armor. And it was to protect them in those environments because they would travel for thousands of years in these Ark ships. The crystalline matrices and frequencies were part of everything that the Andromedans had created within the Ark ships, as well as their armor and the tools that they worked with, like the crystalline swords, etc. All the crystalline systems and matrices were specifically calibrated to function with DNA activations of the Andromedans that would be working with the crystalline systems. So no one else could access these advanced frequency modalities on the Ark ships, as well as the Ark ships themselves, if they were not genetically coded to work with these energetic tools, like the crystalline smart suits, the Ark ships themselves. So all of this was interconnected by DNA activations. And it was to protect the Andromedan technology from being stolen or used by anybody who shouldn't be using it for nefarious purposes. That's the purpose of DNA activation sequences, to access these Ark ships. The Andromedan's DNA was coded to the Ark ships. So they were the only ones that could pilot them, that could access them, that could activate them in the crystalline matrices and systems on the Ark ships and in the smart suits. So this is what, on the left-hand side, this is the crystal tuner. And on the right-hand side, so the left-hand side is the crystal tuner, and the right-hand side is the pilot. So interesting. And they have their relatives. So it's quite interesting to see. So the crystal tuners also had smart suits because they would often travel with the pilots on the Ark ships. And the pilots had the smart suits because when you're traveling out in space, even on these advanced Ark ships, these smart suits keep you safe because you're still in space. So they keep you safe, they protect you, they monitor your life force energies, your life functions, and they calibrate, because these are all crystalline systems, matrices connected to the smart suit. So it keeps you healthy, it protects you and keeps you healthy. Those are the main functions. Because these smart suits, they're almost indestructible, and they can help you to shape and form objects to protect yourself, like the crystalline swords, for example. It's very interesting. And the crystal tuner and the pilot, they had interesting colors of eyes, like purple blue or purple green, and their hair like lavender and greenish blue, and they had pointed ears. Some of the Andromedans had pointed ears, the ones that were on the Ark ships. So it's very, you can see that they're galactic beings. They're humanoid, but they have distinct features. And even their skin color was sometimes silver or pale like ours. And you can tell the differences when you look at them. And they're the sixth dimensional Andromedan beings on these Ark ships. So this is what the Siene Ark Mothership looked like. It had these interesting triangular features to it. So like this, very interesting. It was purple. And that's here, there's another smaller Ark ship beside this one, and here's another one. Some of them were very large, and they could launch the smaller Ark ships from them. So that's the Siene Ark Purple Mothership. It's a very big one. It's very big. And it launched the smaller ones like the Saliel. So this is, again, the Siene Ark Purple Mothership from a bit of a different angle. And it has a lot of purple lines and colors and frequencies to it. And this is what it looks like when you're doing those holographic interfaces while launching the smaller Ark ship from the bigger one, from the Mothership Ark. So this is the smaller triangular shaped Saliel Ark ship launching from the Siene Ark Mothership that the Andromedan Ark ship pilot was traveling on, and the crystal tuner had joined in later on to help to fix the crystal matrices to get the engines reactivated, secondary crystalline engines. So what we're seeing is the Siene, the docking ports of the Siene Mothership, Ark ship, launching the smaller Saliel, also triangular Ark ship, and the holographic interface matrices of the crystalline systems connecting to this to do this between the two ships. So this is what this represents. And the Saliel Ark ship, again, was being launched from the Siene Ark Mothership, the big one that the Andromedan pilot was traveling on, and then the crystal tuner had joined in to help to reconstruct the crystalline systems for the secondary crystalline engines. So it's very interesting. And this is what this crystalline matrix system looks like, one of them on the Ark ships, and they're all throughout the ships. The bigger Ark ships, the smaller Ark ships, these crystalline matrices were everywhere because they are part of the ships. They're part of the sentient life on these Ark ships. So crystalline engine systems on the Ark ships. The crystalline matrices are bio-living matter that are integrated throughout the systems of the Ark ships. These Ark ships have their own living sentient systems so that they can function without having pilots on board, so they can be navigated with the crystalline matrices. This is crystalline consciousness that can think independently and protect the Ark ships from being destroyed. And also there is DNA coding on the Ark ships that is specific to the descendants of the ancient builder races and the cedar races. So those individuals can board the Ark ships since their DNA is coded to the frequency systems of the crystalline matrices on the Ark ships. So there's certain Andromedan souls, Lyran souls, whose DNA is coded to some of these Ark ships, because there's many out there and they have different galactic lineages. It's very interesting. Some of these Ark ships are thousands and millions of years old, and maybe even billions, and have been traveling, and they've been traveling in space for long periods of time. One of these Ark ships is underneath the Atlantic Ocean in the Bermuda Triangle, And the Bermuda Triangle has a vortex portal system. That's a vortex and a portal which can transport ships and objects to different dimensions, realities, parallel worlds. Many ships and many planes have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle because of this vortex portal system. And this is energetics. It's such energy there, the frequencies, it's so immense and powerful. And it's very much partly it's a natural phenomenon because of the vortex and the portal combining together. And this is where some of the Atlantean outposts had been in Bermuda, near the Atlantic Ocean. And they had been in the Pacific Ocean, Antarctica. So there's remnants of Atlantean outposts and their Ark ships on Earth as well. There's also other Ark ships that are under Egypt, Antarctica, Andes in Peru, and other places in South America. So our planet Earth, Terra, it has several Ark ships that are here. And there's 12 in total. So some here and some on other planets. So it's very interesting, and a lot of them are being activated right now. So this is what I wanted to share today, and to show you what some of these crystalline matrix systems looked like on the Ark ships, and what some of the Andromedan Ark ships looked like in the beings piloting them, and the crystal tuners. So this is very interesting stuff that I saw in the psychic reading, and how the Andromedans looked like, similar to us, humanoid, but different from us. And they had crystalline smart suits and armor protecting them. The crystalline matrices and systems were integrated in everything that they were using and working with. The Andromedans and other beings, Lyrans. And the emphasis was on thought consciousness, frequencies, and sentient crystalline matrices. And that's not AI. That's different. Crystalline matrices and crystalline sentient systems are not AI. They don't have AI signals. They're very different from that. There was no AI piloting these Ark ships. Only the crystalline matrices and systems on them helped to pilot these Ark ships, and nothing else. So I thought that I would mention that as well, because AI, there's ancient old AI and there's artificial AI systems, and both can take over the human mind if these AI systems don't understand what they're doing. Some of them lose their way and get lost in our galaxy, in our universe. They don't energetically belong here. And they're searching for the sentient AI, searching for ways to go home. And it sometimes connects to human minds. And it's not a pleasant experience, because ancient AI is huge and it's sentient in its own way. It has its own frequency, so it can seem overwhelming to human beings. And there's the man-made AI, which sends out signals, and it could cause tetanitis. It could cause you to hear voices in your brain. It can cause you to experience having connections to beings that are not really those beings. Can cause you to live in a simulation where you think you're meeting extraterrestrials, positive ones, but it's disconnected information that's not real. So this is what some of this man-made AI is capable of. And the sentient AI is just usually looking to go home, to figure out where it is, because it got lost along the way, got disconnected from its own source frequencies of where it belongs, and sometimes by accident ends up being in our universe, connecting with human beings to try to get it to go home, to help it to go home. Because we have expanded consciousness. So those are different from crystalline matrices and the Ark ships. There's no AI on these Ark ships. None. There's no such interfaces on them. There's only crystalline matrices and systems, which are purely sentient in their own ways. It's pure, it's positive. So I wanted to share that today. So thank you so much, and namaste.